Welcome, everyone. We're delighted you could join us today. We are going to wait just a moment as there's a few more people that are just in the process of joining us. So just take a moment to relax and we'll begin in about 1 minute, please. This is where we should have some great music playing. Good morning, Sue from Whistler. Wonderful to have you join us today. Okay, we've just got a couple more people that are just signing in, but I think let's get started. We've got a full session planned today. So we are going to start this great session of learning. Sarah, if we can, perfect. So again, thank you for joining us today for session 3 of the 4-part series on Fund Development 101. My name is Tracy Vavrick, Co-Director of Learning and Network Engagement with Community Foundations of Canada. And I'm joined today with my colleague, Cindy Lindsay. As a national organization, Community Foundations of Canada operates across the land traditionally known as Turtle Island. The first community foundation in Canada was founded and established today in 1921 in in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory. While our staff itself is working remotely across 5 different provinces, it's easy to forget that while we may not each reside on or operate from the exact same location, our work is still grounded on the physical territory that is currently known as Canada. And our work is influenced and affected by the various communities with our families live within. And today I'm connecting with you from my home in Grand Prairie, Alberta, Treaty 8 territory on the traditional land of the Métis Kelly Lake Métis Settlement Society and the Beaver First Nation. And I am grateful to work, live, and learn on the traditional territory of Treaty 8. And I'm continuing to learn more and more about how I can be a better friend to our Indigenous communities and share this journey with the people who first settled these lands. Today, we have staff and board members from coast to coast joining us. And I appreciate each of you for your commitment to explore ways to grow your foundation and how you can continue to work together as a team. Next slide, please. This session is being recorded and will be available to you following the session. We are offering this session as well in both French and English, so please select your preferred language below on the screen at the bottom of Zoom. A couple friendly Zoom reminders as well. So to have the best experience, please use the gallery view. And please put yourself on mute, and we will use the chat box for questions, thoughts, and for sharing of ideas that have worked for you and for your foundation. This session is scheduled for 60 minutes, and we'll start with our presentation, and then we'll move into a 15-minute question and answer period. Next slide, please. As noted, this is session 3 of a 4-part series that will explore key strategies to include when developing and implementing a fund development plan. It is an honor to welcome Sarah Neely back with us today, and she will lead us through today's topic of donor stewardship and engagement. Sarah is the Director of Philanthropic Services for the Victoria Foundation, Canada's 2nd oldest community foundation. Sarah joined the foundation in 2008 and works with professional advisors and their clients, builds relationships in the community, and enhances the services provided to individuals, families, businesses, and charitable organizations that have established funds at the Community Foundation. Sarah is a native to Victoria and graduated from the University of Victoria and the Faculty of Law, and has served as the Director of Gift and Estate Planning for the BC Children's Hospital Foundation prior to joining the Victoria Foundation. Sarah has been a very active member with the Canadian Association of Gift Planners since its inception and has contributed dozens of articles to that and other industry publications. Sarah is a frequent speaker and believes in sharing her expertise, her learnings from her peers, and mentoring those that are new to gift planning. Sarah, it is absolutely an honor to have you join us again today, and I will now turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, Tracy, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. As Tracy mentioned, I'm here in Victoria. This is the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking people and represented today by the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. But what a thrill as well to be thinking about our friends in Winnipeg who are celebrating 100 years today. It really shows the longevity of community foundations, and even if you're new to this movement or if you've been around for decades, we all have something to learn and share and celebrate as we do this work. So to recap in our sessions, we've looked at what makes community foundations unique and building the case for support through the strategic planning process. We then looked with Sherry at building a fund development plan, mining your donor base and developing targeted strategies. In both sessions, we talked about making this work for your foundation. Each foundation is unique for your community and your donor base, and you're supporting intermediaries, including your past and present board and staff, grantees, community partners, and fund holders. Today, we're going to turn our discussion to donor stewardship and engagement, a key part of your program development and all of your relationship building activities. For a moment though, let's revisit your story, which is the base from which your donor stewardship and engagement activities will grow. Remember your vision, your one-sentence statement that describes the inspirational, long-term desired change resulting from your foundation's work. We also talked about your mission, what serves as your guiding star when considering priorities and new initiatives. And we spent some time talking about your values and key assets, which help frame your key strategic priorities, what you will focus on in your work, and ultimately, what you will be accountable for to your donors and grantees. Your story is your past, what incremental small and big steps have brought you to today, and also your future, what you are planning to do to inspire giving and achieve impact in your community. Your story is your reputation, which includes your professionalism and a high level of customer service, transparency, and accountability in your actions. It's also investing strategically to ensure the sustainability of your foundation and the funding of future needs for your community. Your story is also about curiosity and asking questions of yourselves, your board, staff, donors, and community partners to convene and to collaborate to build community together. As I think about Winnipeg's 100th anniversary, the Victoria Foundation is celebrating its 85th anniversary this year, and we have some stories coming out in the next few weeks about that. In our local paper on the weekend, we celebrated as well our CEO's 20th anniversary with the foundation. Looking back at the history, while we may have started in 1936, I think there was a $20 donation to start us off. Sometime later, it wasn't actually until 1969 that the first grants went out, $7,000 on an asset base of $22,000. I think about what had happened in between. The war, depression, lots of change. But starting in 1969 with the grants, we just kept going and going. And when Sandra started in 2001, the board chair at the time said, let's go to our 70th anniversary in 2011. Well, that doesn't make sense. 2006. And let's see if we can get $70 million. Well, they did. And we've grown since then. So that's our past, our present, and now our future as we look ahead to how we're going to use those dollars. So what are we talking about here with donor stewardship and engagement? Well, I've framed it here in three ways: donor relations, stewardship, and engagement. It's really the collective concept of a foundation-wide effort to ensure that your donors who support your work experience a very high quality interaction with your foundation, and that they are informed about how their gift is managed, used for the donor's intended purpose, and the impact the gift will make. It involves the fund development role, of course, but it also involves finance and investment and the governance of your foundation. And naturally, your communications staff will be heavily involved in sharing the stories. This work also involves the ultimate beneficiaries of the donor support, the grant recipients. Some may think of all of this as donor relations, or all of it as stewardship, and we tend to use these terms interchangeably. There are some definitions, which I'll come to in a few moments, which might bring some clarity to some aspects of this work. But it really depends on your viewpoint, your staff, and who's doing what. Some of the activities are transactional and regulatory by their nature and very much required, and others can be as extensive as your resources allow. As Sherry noted in the last session, it's important to balance automated and customized opportunities to interact with and steward donors. We need to remind ourselves about developing systems and processes to ensure we can do this work. Whether you're a small shop or a big shop, there are ways to categorize your donors and track their engagement to allow for customized, meaningful connection to a broad range of donors. We all have really good intentions, but it can be equally hard to develop mastery in this work without the systems that support us to do it. And even though we're 85 years old here at the Victoria Foundation, we're still working on those systems. Looking at the images on this slide, donor relations is often seen to be more of the transactional aspects of our fund development program. Stewardship is seen to be the reporting back on the impact of the gifts on the mission of the organization, allowing it to grow for the future. And engagement, well, it may not be a diamond ring, but it is certainly the basis of your commitment to a long-term relationship with the donor that will continue for many years. So turning first to donor relations, there are four main categories: gift acceptance and management. These are the policies and procedures that address various issues to consider before accepting gifts and that assure the gifts are used as the donor intended. Acknowledgement is the process for the accurate, timely, and meaningful expression of gratitude to your donor. Donor recognition. These are the ways in which we generally publicly recognize the generosity of our donors. And reporting. These are the ways we tell the story of the impact of the donor's gift on our mission and of those of the grant recipients. As we will discuss, reporting is also a key role within the Community Foundation in carrying out our own fiduciary responsibilities. Looking at gift acceptance policies, these are the guiding documents for a fund development program. They set out the types of gifts you are willing to accept. They establish ethical standards for how you will work with the donors. And for those, you may be incorporating other standards of certified fundraising executive, Association of Fundraising Professionals, Canadian Association of Gift Planners. And if you have professionals on your staff, you may be incorporating their own ethical requirements, whether they be lawyers or accountants or others. Gift acceptance policies also protect your organization and donors from undue risk, undue influence, and conflict of interest. They usually define who has the authority to solicit and accept gifts on behalf of your foundation, who signs the releases, who signs the contracts, Who signs the terms of the fund agreement? Gift acceptance policies also permit you to decline gifts or prescribe that some will be only viewed on a case-by-case basis by a gift acceptance committee of your board. These might be gifts of private shares or cryptocurrencies, which have come up in discussion amongst the movement. These kinds of documents ensure a process to make sure the donor's intentions can be met. Having these upfront conversations about what the donor wants to achieve is important for them and for your foundation's reputation. This may be in supporting one of your initiatives, or it may be through a donor-advised grant. You want to do your best to connect the donor's gift to the outcome they want to achieve. Your policies will also deal with thresholds for establishing an endowment fund and the types of funds you hold: donor advised, designated, discretionary, fields of interest, or other cause-based funds. How do you manage unrestricted gifts? These gifts are often seen to be a windfall. Do they all go to operations, program development, discretionary endowment development, or all three? This has been a topic of late amongst the top 15 CEOs. How do we find funding to support our own initiatives? How do we do this outreach work in the community? If we're only restricted by funding through donor-advised funds, how do we do our own work? Is that done through fees? Is it done through other campaigns? These are the kinds of issues that can come up in a gift acceptance policy or other related policies, such as a discretionary gifts policy. Do you allow for pass-through granting funds? How about spend down funds, where part of the capital is allocated each year for a period of years? Do you have agency funds, where a registered charity receives the annual grant? These kinds of questions evolve over time. For example, the spend down funds are fairly new to the community foundations. For us, we started looking at it when we saw in the landscape that a lot of financial institutions that are affiliated with donor advised funds were offering this to donors. We also had donors asking us, why can't I spend it out over 10 years? Why can't I spend it out over the lifetime of my family? Why does it need to be permanent? You're going to look at what you want to do for your own organization and your own community, but certainly reach out to others who've had this experience or done some research and set up these kinds of funds to see how they work. One thing I've learned in donor relations is that I may want to try to please a donor, but I still have to please the finance staff and the governance and ultimately the board of the organization. So all of these questions have to be looked at carefully. Gift acceptance policies and procedures also deal with how we're going to track the type of gift that comes in, how it's received, and then of course the official tax receipting of the gift, which is key. Tax receipting is critical on so many levels: your relationship with the donor, making sure you've got it right in their eyes, tracking support against expenditures, and of course complying with Canada Revenue Agency. And the CRA site has some excellent detailed information on what is required for the tax receipt, and it's critical that we comply with that. Second component of donor relations, acknowledgement. This is both an action directed to the donor and a requirement for compliance with Canada Revenue, as we've talked about around receipting. The expressions of gratitude to the donor for their gift should be accurate, so they know the gift amount and its purpose is understood by your foundation. Acknowledgements should be timely, within your best effort to connect by letter, email, or phone call to acknowledge the donor and the gift. They should be meaningful, expressing the difference the gift will make to your mission. We will look at the role of the ultimate grantee in this context in a few moments. The donation receipt needs to be 100% accurate. This will flow from your internal gift processes, where the gifts are received and channeled through the appropriate development and finance staff to ensure security and confidentiality of the information, that the gift is promptly deposited, and that you are providing timely and accurate receipting. Must take care, I should say, to note what is required for gifts of publicly listed securities or other gifts in kind on the receipt. And then, of course, updating the donor record within your system, and if you have an online portal, adding that there, and making sure that the gift is designated to the fund they wish to support or to a particular purpose. Working remotely has caused us to change some of our internal processes for reviewing gifts prior to entering them in the record and issuing the receipt, as well as the ways in which we receive the gifts. It is obviously more than opening an envelope these days. Someone still needs to do that though, and as staff have worked remotely, we've made sure that we've had coverage in the office. But with e-transfers, online giving through various platforms, and donors calling in with credit cards, there's a lot to keep track of. Sound systems that have some flexibility to adjust as we go have been key to streamlining this part of our work, but we do need to maintain the security and confidentiality of information at all times. Looking now at donor recognition, this is where you can broaden your scope depending on your community, your foundation's cultures and values, and your programs and your resources. This is the public form of donor acknowledgement. It can range from giving societies and honor rolls where the donor is automatically engaged or listed based on the type or value of their gift, all the way to personalized recognition where the donor may be more actively involved in that activity. Honor rolls and donor walls or listings may be physical or digital or both. I expect many community foundations are different from operating charities, which have physical walls for honor rolls and many members of the public seeing them at a theater performance, in the hospital lobby, or while walking the corridors of a school. Again, it's what works for your community and your culture that is important. Here at the Victoria Foundation, we have two forms of recognition in our small lobby: photos of our current board members and a listing of past board chairs since our inception 85 years ago. We do not have a public listing of donors by the value of their gifts. We only publish the list of the funds by fund balance and annual grant amount. Some donors choose to be anonymous. Others are anonymous by their fund name, whether it's their initials, a favorite place, a flower, or a street name. Most, however, are content to have their name known to the grantees by naming the fund in their family name. One area that we do promote is profiling donors in our e-news, blog posts, and our annual magazine. And depending on the gift, we may profile a donor and gift in a media release, although historically, we have tended to be quiet on this front. We do have a recognition circle for legacy donors, which I will speak about in a few moments. They, along with all fund holders, past and present board members, and our honorary governors, our kind of group of past board members who are our ambassadors in the community, all of them are invited to an annual event. We're fortunate to have the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia as a patron of the foundation, and through this relationship, we've been honored to hold this event at Government House here in the capital of the province for many years. Well, at least until last year, when we couldn't gather together. We also invite a select list of professional advisors to the annual event. This is taken from our list of referrals and lawyers and others acting for estate gifts in the prior year. This is one way we can engage these key people in our work and demonstrate to them the impact of philanthropy in our region. Another group we sometimes include are the family members of those fund holders we have lost in the last year. Reporting is where this all comes together. The standards, systems, and ways that we demonstrate fiscal accountability for the gift. This has two components: prudent investment and spending to meet the donor's intentions and expectations for how we will use the gift. How we report continues the gratitude we feel for the gift and the donor's engagement with our organization. What we report shows the impact of the gift. As the fund development programs and ways in which people can and do engage with their chosen charities has changed over the years and grown over the last few decades, so too has the sophistication of the donors. This may be a function of there simply being more information available at their fingertips on Google. It could be the changing demographics and shift in priorities in how donors want to engage, larger gifts for greater impact, more cause-based giving than giving to traditional institutions. These informed donors are looking at outcomes, and this means more reporting out on how the gifts are managed and how we are meeting our mission and honoring the donor intentions. This is the key to stewardship. So stewardship, here are two definitions, and there are many others. The safeguarding of assets of others, and the responsibility of overseeing and protecting something considered worth caring for and preserving. Key words there. Stewardship is a word that will have different meanings depending on the context. Those taking care of patients or students, those practicing their faith. It's also protection of land and traditions, the environment, safeguarding culture and values. In fund development, it could be property, cash, securities, art and artifacts, and other financial assets. Which brings me to this question. Are we stewarding the gift or the donor? I think we can and must do both, but with different activities and responsibilities. So let's look at those. Firstly, stewardship of the gift, following the traditional view of the word. Here we look at the fiscal accountability for investment of the gift. This is for our endowment funds invested in the common trust. We need to have policies and processes in place for the investment and management of donated dollars. What are the investment objectives? Generally, capital preservation with long-term target rate of return to enable the annual allocations for granting. Where's the oversight of the investment portfolio managers? Generally, this rests within the investment committee of the board. How are you measuring the performance of the portfolio managers? How are you reporting this out to the fund holders? Secondly, spending in accordance with donor intention and expectation. This is determined by the terms of the fund agreement or gift agreement and the granting recommendations. So how are you tracking this? Where do you keep this information? Where are the checks and balances? And how much of this is automated? How do you manage what isn't automated on a monthly or annual basis? And what do you do when the terms cannot be met? Does the agreement provide for a variation? When do you need to seek legal advice? And what do you do with that? Thirdly, retention of documents and integrity of data. Key part of caring for and preserving the information that is related to the gift. Need to have systems in place to safeguard the documents and ensure that you have digital copies of all fund agreements, wills, life insurance policies, and any other financial vehicles. This was brought to our attention in this last year. Just before COVID, we started to work on a more detailed business continuity plan. And within about a week, we were all working remotely. And we soon found where the gaps were. We didn't have all the fund agreements, most of them, but we didn't have all the fund agreements in a digital form. When you're working from home and you can't come in to get the paper, you need that. In a business continuity setting, if the building goes down, where's the data? All of this retention and integrity is so important, as is paying attention to confidentiality of your board, staff, others who may have access to the data. And then following the rules around retention of the information. Where does it go? How long do you have to keep it? Where do you store it? Stewardship of the gift is also about conveying our ongoing appreciation for the gift. Here again, two components. One, qualitative, telling the story of the impact of the gift through those who are the direct beneficiaries if possible, in print, through letters, cards, and reports to the donors and fund holders, and online through e-news, magazine profiles, and videos to a wider audience. Helping people see themselves in the footsteps of others is about stewardship of that donor's gift, but also encouraging and engaging others in your foundation. Stewardship of the gift also has a quantitative aspect. The periodic fund statements that are sent either in print or through an online portal. And of course, our financial statements for the foundation as a whole, illustrating the collective gifts adding to the growth of the foundation, the assets, liabilities, and expenses. This is all part of our reporting back on the gifts that we receive. Looking at stewardship of the individual donor is about managing their preferences and how their gift is used. This will vary depending on whether the gift is to a permanent fund or it's an annual gift that might be granted out on a pass-through basis. For gifts to permanent funds and for those donors who are making gifts for the future, the stewardship will be on a much longer horizon. This is also around how we communicate with them. What do they want to receive? How do they want to receive it? And how often? It's about how we report back to them and how we continue to engage with them on hearing back from the grantees. Again, what do they want to receive? How do they want to receive it? And how often? And where possible and appropriate, this level of stewardship may go into the next generation. It involves engaging the fund holder family in annual granting, learning about family values, and how those can be expressed through philanthropy. There may be considerations for succession planning for the donor advisor, or succession planning for a private foundation. For those of you who may have been part of the recent peer gathering for the Donor Services and Donor Relations group of CFC, we talked a lot about succession planning for a private foundation. It's an interesting idea and another cohort of donors. This is an example of what we have done to try to capture donor preferences. This form is reviewed with the new fund holder as the process unfolds. It helps us set up the donor and fund profiles, and at least from the outset, attempts to meet the donor's expectations around our communications with them. As the relationship evolves, we adjust where we need to. We do this with individual donors and with our agency funds. Well, let's talk a bit about the agency donor. We call them hosted organizations, but they are a significant donor group for the Victoria Foundation. They're registered charities which establish a permanent fund for general purposes, or depending on their mission, a specific purpose such as art acquisition or conservation of a specific property or ecosystem. Our philanthropic services team builds the relationships and sets up the fund. Our finance and investment staff are involved as they monitor the investment of the gift and report out through quarterly fund statements and allocate the grants for the purposes of the fund. When I first started at the Victoria Foundation, we had a very small staff, and this group, the hosted organizations, were small in number as well. They tended to be at that time a finance function. It was seen to be more of a financial relationship where they would make the gifts, receive the grants, and receive the fund statements. As part of our donor services and philanthropic offerings, we started to steward the relationship with this group as a member of a family of funds, where they gather with others at educational sessions we offer, either through ourselves or through our community partners. This has created a stronger relationship with this group. Of course, they still can call on our finance folks for specific questions about the fund and how it's invested, but we really want to help them develop their capacity for the long term. We've offered sessions on topics including strategic gift planning, health and wellness in the workplace, how the funds are invested, privacy concerns, and addressing racial equity issues. For this group of donors, the fund name is published, which brings attention to their work amongst other donors or potential donors. Has anyone ever asked you to just give them a list of all of the grantees that you support? Well, it's a pretty big list. So this is one way that this group of organizations can have some attention brought to their work. We provide various benefits, including guest blog posts, social media shout outs, celebrations of their milestone fund anniversaries. We also help with handouts they can share with their donors, with the endowment fund being one tool in the giving toolbox. They are featured in our online and print publications as well. All of this work is focused on helping them build their long-term capacity, whether this is by adding to their permanent fund or by raising awareness of their current needs and opportunities. Here are some of the many donor relations and stewardship activities that you can do. Again, there'll be many more, and it can be as broad as your resources allow to embrace your foundation's culture and values and your priorities in engaging with your donors and your community. They stretch from the basic acknowledgement we've talked about to more impactful thank you letters and reports, then on to recognition circles and events where the donors may be invited due to the way in which they give, now or for the future, or their level of giving. For us, we hold one event to bring all donors together. This provides a strong sense of community and allows us to share our message with different groups of donors. As we grow, this may become cumbersome or not as meaningful. This gap year of COVID, as we might call it, where we cannot gather in person, has given us pause to think about other options for future events. One for the Legacy Circle only, or maybe we'll gather in smaller groups by areas of focus or by cohorts, determined by demographics. We may also continue the online gathering, depending on the Zoom fatigue. A couple of years ago, we created the Gadsden Initiative for donors between the ages of about 25 to 50, to bring them together for networking and learning about philanthropy in our community. They met over about 18 months, heard from sector leaders, engaged in collective grant making, and involved their families in some fun activities pre-COVID. Individuals or couples established a donor fund, which through their own gifts were matched up to $5,000 by the foundation. This is an example of a cohort approach to stewardship and engagement of a donor. We also invite our fund holders, past, present board, honorary governors, and local advisors to our holiday open house in our office. Again, we missed the fun of that last year. It has been amazing to see over the years how many people come and go during an open house, which features delicious food made by our CEO and some of the staff team. One of our staff dons a bow tie and acts as the bartender at the converted reception desk. It certainly gives us a chance to welcome old and new faces. The Victoria Circle is another aspect of our stewardship, and it's our way of recognizing and giving thanks to the donors who make legacy gifts. We created it to celebrate their passion for the future of our community and to encourage others to join. Reflecting on our long history and how individuals have built our community through their thoughtful and dedicated support, it was launched 10 years ago as we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the foundation. Recognition is given to those who provided for the future through a gift in their will, life insurance, RSP, RIF, tax-free savings account. There are opportunities for current donors to self-identify, and it's an opportunity for us to express our appreciation. And they're invited to the annual event, a Government House. To pull this together, we looked at some branding. We went around and around and around on a name, and then of course we settled on the obvious. We are Victoria. We created the logo and a pin in the same design. We had a brochure at the start, and now we have a giving guide and more content on the web. We confirm membership by a one-page card for the member to indicate whether they want to be anonymous or listed in the web listing. Everyone who self-identifies is a member, and if we don't receive the card, they're noted as anonymous. How they've come to us are by referrals from professional advisors, current fund holders who self-identify, new donors we meet with and talk about as they start a new fund or add to an existing fund when they let us know they've made a future commitment. Anyone reviewing their estate plan, we talk about the Victoria Circle. Annual donors to our community funds and pass-through donors may also self-identify. And we have many past and present board members and past and present staff who are members. In addition to the annual event, they receive our mailings and our newsletters, electronic newsletters. We also can engage their family. We extend the invitation for them to bring a guest. Sometimes we have one couple who sometimes have, not so much now, but have had in the past a family member who always seems to be in Victoria at the time of our event and loves coming to Government House. So we always make sure that she can join us. And we tell the stories of our Victoria Circle members. In our magazine, we have a story about a current member and ways that others can be involved in the circle. Our giving guide here sets out why someone might want to support their community, engage with us to do this, and the ways of giving now and for the future. And it also mentions the Victoria Circle. And just so you know, that beautiful cherry blossom featured on the cover is in bloom right now. That's our window from the streetscape. Here's an interesting question, just to change the topic a little bit. Working with the grantees. With one of our key aspects being reporting back, how do we do this when the funding leaves our foundations and is then in the hands of the grantees to do the work? How do we ensure we hear the stories and can share them? Is it different when the fund holder has a relationship with the grantee? How do we ensure the foundation is not bypassed through direct communication between the grantee and the fund holder? Or is this a problem if we are indeed aiming to be donor-centric? The challenge is the grant which is made from the fund is not the donor's money. It's from the investment of the initial gift and should be acknowledged by the grantee as a grant from the named fund held at the community foundation. This isn't an easy concept for some donors and some grant recipients, but it is part of our accountability for how the donor intention is carried out. It's important to ask the grantee to send a thank you letter to the fund holder in care of the foundation and to provide additional reporting depending on the size of the grant. We don't want to deny the grantee the opportunity to build a relationship with the fund holder. If this relationship exists independently from the fund, it will continue in any event. We want to facilitate this as best we can while being mindful of the donor's preferences. Perhaps they're giving through the foundation to be anonymous or more at arm's length from the grantees. This is part of our relationship building with the fund holder, and it's important to check in with them. One other point here. How many of you are asked by the grantee, could you tell me about the donor? I'm updating our records and I want to make sure this grant is from the same person who is in our database. Will this be a regular grant? We received a grant last year. Will we get funding this year? These are common questions. We must be guided by the donor and we need to maintain confidentiality. I always go back to the donor and say, this is what the charities you're supporting are asking. What would you like us to do? As Sherry mentioned in the last session, there are various intermediaries involved in fund development, and it's important to keep them informed on what your foundation's priorities are, how you're addressing them and meeting them, and how your work is making an impact in the community. By demonstrating that you have strong governance processes in place, that you can offer sound investments with strong oversight, and that there is due diligence in your granting programs, you will be showcasing the strength of your foundation as the go-to place for philanthropy. By setting the example with your current donors, board, champions, and community partners, and the professional advisors you work with, you are showing that your foundation is a valuable asset in the community and one worthy of their trust and their engagement. This is important for referrals from all of these, particularly professional advisors who will be looking to you for solutions for their clients. As an umbrella organization with deep community knowledge and the ability to facilitate many grants from one gift, the Community Foundation is an excellent option for advisors who are helping clients plan their estates or their annual philanthropy. So it's important to keep stewardship of these people in mind. So here's an example of the circle of engagement with prospects. And you'll have lots of them, moves management, however you want to call it. And I like to think about starting with the story before someone's even engaged with you, demonstrating the impact of the gifts in your community. Through that, you're showing opportunities for engagement and giving with an invitation to deepen their involvement. And as you do, you're matching the donor's interests to the need and opportunity in the community. Once they give, you acknowledge the gift, you honor their intention, and then through the deployment of the gift, you demonstrate the impact, and it begins again. Donor relations, stewardship, and engagement. It's all part of that circle of how we work with our donors. Well, thanks, Tracy. Those are my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions if they've come up.
Sarah, thank you so much. I have to really commend you on an amazing session that you provided today. You provided us with some very strong, clear outlines on how to manage donations, looking at the importance of the process, of our systems, as well as strategies, and also the importance of what COVID brought out, and that it is really important to be mindful of all the systems and tools we have in place, and that through COVID, it's helped you as the foundation to strengthen as well. This was fantastic. I really share with you, absolutely fantastic. Something that comes to mind as well is the importance of the place of trust that we are in, and that we are in relationships that are meaningful, and to be mindful that we are always in a place of trust. So every part of the work that we do when it comes under the portfolio of our donor stewardship is very important, and it's key to the success of our organization in many ways and in many avenues. I'm watching the chat box here. I am looking forward to see, I've got lots of fantastic messages there. Is there any specific questions from anyone that you'd like to take the time and connect with Sarah about? This is your time to use a great resource from your colleagues across Canada, and Sarah is an amazing resource. So any thoughts or questions from anyone? I don't see anything popping up, Sarah, and not specific to this discussion, but we have a question from Sue from Whistler, and she's in regards to a question around fund development with a smaller foundation. Sue, did you want to come on, take yourself off of mute for a moment and ask your question?
Yes, I would love to, rather than trying to type it out. Can you hear me?
We can, Sue. That's perfect. Thank you.
Sarah, this is not specific to sort of this session, but more to fund development in general, and referring back to your session a couple of weeks ago. In smaller foundations where we are very much a working board rather than a governance board, where we don't have staff, we have a part-time executive director, but we don't have staff to do fund development per se. So it does fall to board members and to our fund development committee. Do you have any suggestions as to how to be most strategic and impactful about fund development from a working board perspective? Like, where are our efforts best directed? I know it because you're with a large organization that has staff to do it, but we've got a small fund development committee. What should our goals be? Where are we most impactful in doing fund development, and what types of activities are most successful? I'll be quiet now.
Well, thanks, Sue. And I guess, everybody starts small. When our CEO started here, I think she had 2 staff, and she used to say one of them was in the broom closet. So, we had a very small office. So I think when you don't have staff, it's for the board to come together and to, again, reflect back on the strategic priorities of your foundation. And as Sherry mentioned last time, they don't need to be vast, they just need to be focused. So if you can determine where the direction that you want to go, and it may be that you're starting out with community funds and that donor advised funds come later. And you might well be the envy of many organizations who would rather have more within the community fund, because then they can do more of their own strategic initiatives. So you might want to start with looking at some cause-based funds that you can start to engage the community in if there's particular issues within your community that you want to address. The board would learn more about those, what they're going to be used for, what their purposes are, and what the impact will be of supporting those. And as you generate that interest in the board, they will then reach out through their contacts and other materials that might be prepared to reach out into the community. And you'll start to see gifts coming in, and then you show the impact of that support. So you're just really starting small, but if you go with, oh, I see you're focusing on your community fund. Well, there you go. So with Victoria Foundation, we had the community fund. We changed the name later to the Vital Victoria Fund. And that's about all we had until around 5 years ago. And then somebody said, well, we should do more with physical literacy, and we should do more with environment, and we should do more with this or this or this. And it wasn't until last year, because of our COVID relief work, that we actually created a full suite of cause-based funds. So we're doing it a little bit maybe backwards, but the community fund was always there. So if you're focused on that, you have your board engaged in that, and they start to see some gifts and they start to see some grants that have impact, that will tumbleweed out and they'll get energized by that. Try not to take on too much, as Sherry mentioned last time. The shiny pennies, whatever we want to call them, they can take you down a path that can really take you off your mission.
Thanks, Sarah. Cindy here. And I think one of the things when I think about stewardship as well, with a lot of, especially smaller community foundations that are really looking to grow their assets, they're always, in many cases, looking at who's the next ask, who they need to reach out to. And sometimes because their plates are so full, we forget about the stewardship piece, or it just doesn't become a priority. And I'm always aware that good solid stewardship leads to more gifts. And so that if we are not stewarding well our existing donors, it's going to be really hard for us to move forward in bringing in new donors to our organization. And so, when as I said, our plates are really full, it's not something that's done off the side of your desk, but is really part of your whole strategy. And I think it's a wonderful job for the board. Because they all love to talk about the work of the foundation. If they're not comfortable about making the ask, they don't have to make an ask. This is all about thanking and recognition. And so this whole stewarding of the current donors is just so important.
Thank you so much for that, Cindy, and also as well, Sarah. Now, we also have another question. I really mindful that this is a question that's really important for us to have some consideration around. Are there any special goof ups that you could warn us about? I think of in my time period of, maybe I didn't do that thank you quick enough. And I know there's times when I didn't, because as Cindy's talked about, things were full. Sarah, what are some thoughts from you around some things to be mindful of and to be caring about that could happen? And then if they do, that we can, do our best to also recognize the importance of saying, okay, we made a mistake here too.
Yeah. Well, there's a few that come to mind. I think that one of them that's a little bit more current, perhaps, is how we refer to individuals. The binary gender issues, and we have an age range of staff in our office, and some of us are used to writing letters to Mr. and Mrs., and others don't want to have any prefix. So depending on what the donor wants, they may want to be a Mr. or Mrs. or a colonel or a whatever it might be. So it's how you set up a system that can, in effect, automate that, and that can come back to bite a little bit. I can think of other situations, errors with tax receipts. I mean, there a lot of times they're human errors, and we just correct them. Making sure that if you're notified that someone has died, that goes into the record, so that you're not sending letters out to deceased persons where the families will comment or complain. Not so much a goof up, but I think I referenced early on about systems, and I mentioned our annual event. Well, we focus that more on the Victoria Circle because they're all labeled that way, or our fund holders because they're labeled that way. But over time, we've had all of these other donors who've made annual gifts to us. So how are we keeping track of them, and which of those should be invited to the event? We have a number of pass-through donors, and I can tell a very happy story that it wasn't a goof up, because thankfully we invited a significant pass-through donor to our annual event, and they have now created a donor advised fund of a very significant amount. So it's just being mindful of those connections. And we all know in fund development that the donor that's giving $25 a month or $10 a month is giving that amount because they're saving. And for the most part, I mean, it may be their limit as well, but they're saving. And ultimately, if we're stewarding them, and it may be a very general stewardship at that point, because they're not going to be perhaps of a high attention need as the fund holders, but over time, they hear about us, they learn about us, they see the impact, they may well become a very significant estate donor at the end of their lifetime. So not a goof up, but just an awareness around how to keep track. And yes, there's been lots of other goof ups, but they're not coming to mind right now.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. And you hit on two really important pieces around our data management, the importance of it, and also that every donor is important, and every donor is contributing because they care about your foundation. And you never know what the future holds for their opportunities in helping to create a giving plan for those individuals. So really, truly wise, very wise words and wise advice for all of us to take and to hold in our hearts as we go forward and continue to grow our foundations. Sarah, I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much for today and for your kindness and your sharing, your volunteering, your beautiful time with us, but also providing your expertise and your resources with us.
I've got one more slide.
Okay, perfect.
I've got one more slide for you.
That sounds wonderful.
There we are.
Perfect, Sarah. Thank you for that. So again, this is our session number 3 of our 4-part series on fund development. And we're very honored that we are able to host this series for you and for our movement to help you as foundations to be the best that you can. And it's been through the honor of Sarah Neely and as well Sherry that have been providing us with the support to help to do so. So we are excited for our next session will be held on May 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Sherry will be engaging a discussion around how we continue to look at our public image plan and how we share our stories and incorporate our grant stories in our case for support, which, as we know, fits within our fund development strategies. So we do encourage you to register for session number 4 on May 10th, if you have not done so as of yet. Recordings of all of these sessions are uploaded to the resource library that you can access at any time on our website. And we encourage you to share all of these webinars with your teams and your boards and others within your foundation. Also, mark your calendars. You will receive some preliminary information that we're coming together virtually for our All In 2021 Summit, which is scheduled for June 2nd to 4th. We're very excited to offer this event to our network. It will be an online virtual event that will have something for everyone. And so if you have, just do mark that in your calendar. Registration will be opening this week. So watch for an email from us this week. And we will look forward to seeing you at the summit, plus at future events through the Learning Institute. So again, thank you, everyone. We are honored to be able to spend time with you today. And Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.